folks. Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. Obviously not the most scenic setting today. I'm in a hotel room, as you can tell, giving a speech tonight about the rise of Islam in the West, in particular, the threat to the United States and Europe. It's going to be interesting. So that's tonight, and I'll be back in studio tomorrow. But in the meantime, we talk about the swerve. That's what I called it back in June. President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu basically fooling the world, and especially fooling the mainstream media here in America and in Israel, and leading the world, and in particular and key, the Iranian regime, leading them to believe that the U.S. and Israel were not on the same page, that the U.S. would not only not support an Israeli strike on Iran and Iran's nuclear facilities, but the U.S. certainly wanted no parts of that at all. Well, history has been written. The 12-day war happened. Operation Midnight Hammer happened as well. And Bibi and Trump, they met 2 weeks after the 12-day war ended and Operation Midnight Hammer ended, resulting in the destruction of Iran's nuclear weapons program, the destruction of half of Iran's ballistic missiles, many of its military leaders, nuclear scientists killed. And they kind of did a victory lap in D.C. at the White House. I was actually at the Blair House, which is right next to the White House, for a briefing with Prime Minister Netanyahu, me and a few other journalists in the wake of that. And they were riding high for sure. And the world had to feel duped because, again, the swerve happened. Trump and Netanyahu led the world to believe one thing, and they did another thing. Well, we may be seeing right now, I believe, the swerve to end all swerves. Bibi is heading back to the White House tomorrow, Wednesday, February 11th, to meet with President Trump, I believe, for the 7th time in the past year alone. Remember, it was around this time, I think February 6th or 7th last year, shortly after President Trump was sworn back into office, Bibi came to the White House, and that's where President Trump sprang on the world his Gaza plan to basically empty Gaza of the Palestinians who have destroyed Gaza and build high rises there, build it into an economic zone, basically try something different, because everything the so-called international community and successive U.S. administrations have tried over the past 70 years has not worked. So Trump said, wow, why don't we try something different? And there was weeping and gnashing of teeth in the halls of the UN and the European Union and the Democrat Party, needless to say, when Trump suggested that about Gaza. But that was their first meeting with Trump back in office, and there have been 7 on both sides of the pond since then, D.C. and in Israel. So needless to say, the cooperation and the coordination between the United States and Israel has never been closer. There's no daylight. They're on the same page. Are there differences on some issues, the Gaza peace plan, et cetera? Of course. Every ally has some differences. No one completely agrees on everything. If you have any doubts about that, get married and you'll see. But you still have a great relationship. You get along, you're aligned. And that's how the U.S. and Israel always are. And they are on this Iran issue as well. That's where the swerve comes in. Now, I'm going to tell you what I mean, the latest edition of it. I believe I may be wrong. Look, I may be wrong. Maybe there is a grand bargain fast approaching with the Iranian regime. Perhaps finally the regime will agree to a deal to give up its nuclear program, its ballistic missiles, its support of terror groups. Maybe I'm all wrong. Maybe it's just gunboat diplomacy, as they say, this massive U.S. armada that is now surrounding Iran, and more forces reportedly on the way. And Bibi coming to D.C. at this time. Maybe it's all just a way to use leverage and to pressure the mullahs in Iran into a deal. But looking at what we've seen play out with that military buildup, it is pretty unprecedented, folks, to build up that much over a period of weeks and then not do something with that armada. So I'm going to talk about this latest edition, I think, of the Trump-Bibi swerve. And I love this pairing between these two leaders. I compare them to two modern day Winston Churchills. In a sea of Chamberlains across the Western world right now, Bibi and Trump are a pair of modern day Churchills. Both of them saw the gathering storm of a nuclear Iran and Iran's alliance with China, Russia, and North Korea. They saw it, and Trump and Bibi against Iran took action against it. Smashed Iran's ring of fire, did Israel, and then Trump joined Israel to smash Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. The rest of the West is another story, as I discuss often here on the live stream. But in Benjamin Netanyahu, you have, and in the nation of Israel, you have the first line of defense for Judeo-Christian Western civilization. In the United States, under President Trump, key point there, under Donald Trump, you have the last line of defense for Western civilization. And folks, let me tell you, when Trump leaves office in 2028, if a left-wing regime comes to power in my home country, the United States, then the lights go out on the West. The lights go out on Judeo-Christian Western civilization. You might say, wow, that's a big statement. Oh, really? Look across the Western world right now. Look at Europe. Look at the UK, France, Germany, Sweden, Belgium. The list goes on. Netherlands, madness. Spain, which just announced, the socialist government there, that it's going to legalize 500,000 mostly Muslim illegal migrants. The list goes on. The UK in particular is committing cultural suicide. Left-wing globalist socialist governments driving the West into the ground. Canada, Mark Carney. Australia, Albanese. Look across the landscape, ladies and gentlemen. Other than the exceptions, you have Viktor Orban in Hungary. You have Giorgia Meloni doing some good things in Italy. You have Poland standing strong in many ways and preserving their culture. Other than that, I say Western civilization, or what's left of it. So no, it is not an exaggeration for me to say, if the leader of the free world, the United States, is led by a radical leftist globalist, then yeah, Judeo-Christian Western civilization will indeed be on its last legs. No doubt. So 2028 looms large. Look, the midterms in 2026 loom large here in the United States. That's another story for another time, perhaps. God sits on the throne through it all, so I'm not worried. But there is concern about preserving civilization. And the barbarians are not just at the gates, they are inside the gates. And one of the main contingents of barbarians is the barbarous regime in Tehran right now, which is slaughtering its own people, executing them as I speak. Is it 40,000 now? Maybe more? In a matter of a month? Slaughtered, butchered in the streets by the Iranian regime? Okay, that's a big part of the swerve. I'm going to break down what I mean by that, what I think is kind of developing here, potentially, and I'm not omniscient, needless to say. I may be wrong. But I think in an educated guess sort of way, just based on what we've seen over the past few years between Trump and Bibi and the past few months in particular, I think we can see where this may be going. But in today's Middle East, and with Donald Trump, certainly expect the unexpected. We'll break it down in a minute. Before I do, and I'm going to break down, you saw the thumbnail, the title for today's live stream, Iran preparing for war. You might say, wow, that sounds pretty serious. It is. They're already hardening their nuclear facilities, or what's left of them, that enriched uranium, trying to protect it. So the Iranian regime, which is a true group of fanatics, is digging in. Again, I'll break it down in a minute. Before I do, we talk about Israel being the first line of defense for Western civilization. If Israel goes down, we all go down. Thankfully, I've read to the back of the book, so I know that's not going to happen, but it's not going to be easy. Israel, over the past 2 years plus, since October 7th, has been fighting a war on 7 fronts. And folks, Magen David Adom, our partner for today's live stream, is on the front line of all of those 7 fronts, that Iranian axis that has come against Israel from all directions. Israel, a tiny nation the size of the state of New Jersey. Well, Magen David Adom, they are Israel's emergency services system. They are Israel's first responders, the EMTs, the medical workers, the paramedics. That is Magen David Adom. They are the first on the ground when a missile, God forbid, falls in Israel, a suicide bomber, a car ramming. It happens. It happens too much. And Magen David Adom first responders are there on the ground. And not only that, if there's a car accident, God forbid, any kind of mishap, they are there and they collect, distribute Israel's blood supply for civilians and the IDF. They dispatch every ambulance in Israel. They are the front lines in the nation of Israel. It's SaveLivesIsrael.com, SaveLivesIsrael.com to support their important work. It's God's work, and they're not getting paid for this. 90% of the team at Magen David Adom, thousands, they're volunteers. They have families and 9-to-5 jobs, but they're volunteering and risking their lives. Over 30 Magen David Adom volunteers have been killed in action since October 7th. Over 17 ambulances destroyed. This is God's work. And I can't think of a better way to support Israel, God's land, fulfill that biblical mandate than to stand with and support Magen David Adom. Again, it's SaveLivesIsrael.com. You've never been to Israel? Well, this is a way to stand with and support the Jewish nation and stand on the front lines with Magen David Adom. SaveLivesIsrael.com. Iran considers its front lines, of course, to be its nuclear program, or at least it used to. Now remember, Israel, Operation Rising Lion, also known as the 12-Day War, Israel got a jump on things and struck Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. Then President Trump came in at the end of the 12-Day War and lowered the final hammer on those nuclear sites. Operation Midnight Hammer, those B-2 bombers, destroyed Iran's nuclear weapons sites. But here's the deal. Under the rubble, there is still enriched uranium, which if Iran ever cleared the rubble and was able to get to it, they could use it to restart their nuclear program. That's obviously a red line for Israel and the United States, as Trump and Bibi have made clear many times. Well, now Iran is very concerned that with a U.S. and possibly a joint U.S.-Israeli strike, onslaught, nearing against the Iranian regime, they're concerned that what's left of their nuclear program may be targeted. So here we have it. From the Jerusalem Post, Iran is preparing for a possible U.S. strike. Images, high-resolution satellite images of the Isfahan nuclear complex show that the entrances to this Iranian nuclear facility have been covered with earth, and the northernmost tunnel entrance, which features additional defensive measures, has also been backfilled with soil. Now, backfilling the tunnel entrances would help dampen any potential airstrike and also make ground access in a special forces raid to seize or destroy that enriched uranium. It would make it much more difficult. They're trying to harden that target. Preparations like these were also observed in the days before Operation Midnight Hammer struck Isfahan, as well as Natanz and Fordo, those other nuclear sites. So this activity is part of a larger push, according to the Jerusalem Post, quoting some experts, a larger push by the regime to create defensive layers to their nuclear and ballistic missile facilities in anticipation of a possible U.S. strike. So they're backfilling it with soil. They're trying to cover everything up and make it impenetrable and untouchable. Again, that stockpile of enriched uranium, which is still kind of laying there under the rubble. They're trying to really conceal it. That's number one. You have the nuclear factor. But number two, the ballistic missiles, which I just mentioned. Look, Iran is feverishly, pardon me, working on replenishing their ballistic missile stockpiles. That's the big order, or the big agenda item, for Prime Minister Netanyahu's meeting with President Trump in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. The nuclear program is one thing. And look, as I just laid out, they still have enriched uranium there, buried, but it's there. And they'd love to tap into it someday soon. But that's a longer term threat now. That threat's been neutralized, certainly for the time being. The ballistic missile program is another story. And look, Israel, I believe, destroyed half of Iran's ballistic missile stockpiles during the 12-day war, and a good amount of the ballistic missile launchers, which was a key move. But Iran is feverishly, there's that word again, replenishing those stockpiles, reportedly with some help from China, the Chi-coms in Beijing. Surprise, surprise. The U.S. and Israel are very concerned about these ballistic missiles. We saw the damage they did during the 12-day war. Look, people were killed in Israel, dozens. A lot of property was destroyed by these missiles. They're reaching Tel Aviv. They're reaching major civilian centers, population centers in Israel. Israel's got these incredible missile defense systems. Iron Dome, David Sling, you have the Arrow for long-range missiles, the Arrow system. Now you have Iron Beam, the laser-based missile defense system. Israel completely cutting edge in that regard. But you're not going to get all of them. The sheer volume of an Iranian launch of dozens of ballistic missiles, tough to get them all. And then if Hezbollah, if the Houthis, what's left of them, if they throw their hats in the ring, it'll be the end of both of them if that happens, I believe. Because this is it. If the U.S. and Israel strike now, they're playing for keeps. There will not be another day, I believe, for this regime. Unless the regime is completely crippled, but it manages to hang on somehow. But I think a lot of that ball is in the Iranian people's court. And Israel and the U.S. reportedly in the leadership believe if they hit the mullahs hard enough, that it could encourage the Iranian people to get out in the streets again and avenge the slaughter that was perpetrated upon them by this wicked regime. But I think the U.S. and Israel will go all in. And by the same token, though, I think Iran will probably go all in that if they think the regime is over, they're going to go out, in their view, in a blaze of glory. And the Ayatollah, remember, Ayatollah Khamenei is a true believer. He is a true jihadist fanatic. He's a 12er. It's that sect of Shia Islam which the Iranian regime practices and believes in. They're 12ers. They believe the 12th Imam, also known as the hidden Imam. He's been concealed for hundreds and hundreds of years. But at the end of days, this is Islamic end times theology. At the end of days, the hidden Imam, the 12th Imam, will reveal himself. And he'll lead the armies of Islam to victory over the Jews and the Christians. And Iran will be the tip of the spear of his forces. And the Mahdi will be accompanied by Jesus. Jesus will be the wingman to the Mahdi, in their view. This is their eschatology, it's their ideology. It's crazy, but they really believe it. And I think in the West, the Western mind can't comprehend these people are true believers. They really believe this stuff. They're fanatics. And so you can't reason with people like that. This is not mutually assured destruction, which we had during the Cold War. The Soviets didn't want to die. The Americans didn't want to die. Hence, we didn't fire nuclear weapons at each other. A nuclear Iran is a whole different ball game. You got a fanatical jihadist regime which glorifies martyrdom and suicide bombings and death for Allah. So, and Khamenei is a true believer. He believes he is divinely mandated to preserve the Iranian regime and to preserve the Iranian revolution. So he's a guy who probably wouldn't go quietly, he and the regime, unless, and this is very possible, the U.S. and Israel unleash a lightning strike, which renders Iran incapable of responding with a lot of force. Israel did that, right? With Hezbollah. I mean, the Great Northern War, I talked about it so much for years. It's coming, it's coming. It did come, but it was also almost anticlimactic because Israel, with Operation Exploding Beeper, won that war in one day. And after that, Nasrallah taken out, the Radwan military leadership for Hezbollah taken out. So could we see something like that this time around if the U.S. and Israel strike? We could. But you got to prepare for the worst case scenario. And that's why I think President Trump, as we talk about the swerve of all swerves, as I called it earlier, that's why I think President Trump has taken his time here. Look, he tweeted out a month ago, help is on the way. Maybe he'd want to take that tweet back because help is on the way, I believe, but it wasn't as fast as the Iranian people expected. Nonetheless, it is on the way, certainly. And I think Bibi and Trump now, they're on the same page in public. I mean, they intentionally back in April, May, June gave mixed messaging and led the mainstream media to believe, and the Iranians to believe, that they weren't on the same page. And now Bibi is saying, I'm very concerned about a potential deal. If there's a deal, it's got to check all the boxes. And folks, you've known the boxes for what, 20 years now? No nukes, no ballistic missiles, and no support for terror. Hamas, Hezbollah, end the proxy support. That's what the Iranian regime must do. They refuse to do it. On Friday, in the live stream I did on Friday, I talked about it. And by the way, if you miss any of our live streams, newscasts, you can find them all here in our archives under videos. So make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We just passed 1.1 million subscribers for such a time as this. And we'd love you to join us here every day as watchmen and women on the wall. And make sure to click the notification bell, because if things blow up, quite literally, in the Middle East and a major operation starts, I will be coming to you live with updates. You won't want to miss that. You'll want to get that alert. So make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. But, you know, Bibi's going to DC and he's saying, look, it's got to be a good deal. And Trump, this is where the swerve comes in. Trump saying, Bibi wants a deal too. He just wants a good deal. But Bibi wants to see a deal. Folks, Bibi doesn't want to see a deal. Bibi wants to see this regime destroyed and out of the picture. Amen. As any right-thinking, freedom-loving person should. But you see the mixed messaging. Trump saying, well, we don't want to use military force. I hope I don't have to use it. We've got this massive armada steaming towards Iran. I don't want to use it, but they got to do a deal. And he said, I think this time's different. He said today, Trump said, I really think they want to do a deal. But if you remember, before the 12-day war, Trump was saying similar things. I really think Iran wants a deal. We don't want to hit Iran. So this is where the swerve comes in and the mixed messaging and keeping Iran off balance, because it gives Iran a false sense of security. They certainly had that back in June, because when Israel, as it started the 12-day war, it launched it on June 13th, it took out Iranian military leaders in their beds, in their own beds. If they were concerned that the U.S. and or Israel were about to strike, they'd be sleeping someplace else, probably in a bunker underground. But they were so comfortable and so assured that America won't do anything. Trump's all bluster, and he certainly won't let Israel do anything. They were so self-assured that they slept in their homes with their families that night in their own beds. And it didn't end up too well for them. So that's the effect that this had. This time around, is Iran getting overconfident again? Look, they already rejected the one demand from President Trump. He said, look, at the negotiations last Friday, look, you can't enrich uranium anymore. They said, no, we're going to continue to enrich uranium. To me, the negotiation's over. And why even have these negotiations? But again, I think it is part of the swerve where Trump is sending mixed messages. And it's also buying the U.S. time and Israel time to get ready, to bolster their defenses. Look, not only against U.S. bases in the region, which Iran has threatened to attack if they're attacked, but Israel, the homeland itself. So it's developing rapidly, folks. And this meeting is big tomorrow, number 7 in only a year between Trump and Bibi. I don't know if I've seen two world leaders this close meeting this frequently in such a short span of time. Certainly not an American president meeting with any one leader. So there's a special bond there, this pair of Churchills, Trump and Netanyahu, who've already changed history in the Middle East. During Trump's first term, they changed history. The Abraham Accords, Soleimani's elimination. We could go on. So things are happening. I believe they have prophetic implications big time. I'll be watching very closely tomorrow the Trump-Bibi meeting at the White House, and I will bring you an update, no doubt. Until next time, until then, pray for that meeting, by the way. Pray for wisdom and discernment for these two great leaders. Until next time, God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.